Hey everybody, welcome to another tutorial. This time we're going to cover modules and creating a customer data module. So what a customer data module is in Phoenix is if you go under the register when you're signing up new customers for your store, it asks all of these questions. A customer data module allows you to create questions of your own and save those into the database and manage that data for your customers. So we're going to add a field on here. The field we're going to add is how did you hear about us? And we'll have an answer field where they can enter an answer to that question. And then we'll review how to edit that in the admin, how to show that in the admin, and some of the other options we can do with that. So let's get started. Okay, so we're just going to switch over to the code base here. I'm editing version 1.0.8.1 for this demo. So if I go under includes modules customer data, I can see the existing customer data modules. And we're just going to, as I've covered in some of my other videos, if you haven't watched my modules getting started video, you should probably stop this and go and watch that and then come back. The facts module is what we're going to copy, and we're just going to repurpose this to our needs. It just saves us from coding everything from scratch, and it's a good guide. So if I just open cd facts, I can open both of the files. So we've got a language file and we've got the class. So if I go to the language directory, so here I'm under includes languages, English, customer data, cd facts. I'm going to duplicate that file and we're going to call this cd, which is for customer data. And we're going to say how find us. Something unique enough that it's unlikely that a core module would ever be called that. So how find us is probably not going to come out in the core. So that gives us our language file. And then we will go to the class file, which again is under includes modules, customer data, cd facts, and we will copy that. And then we will open that. You'll notice I'm getting an error. That's because the class name has to match the file name. So we're going to change this to how find us. Our key base is module customer data facts. We want to change that. So we're just going to do a replace and replace it with how find us. And we'll replace all instances of that. And then we'll also do that in our language file so it all matches. We will change this to say entry how find us. And then as far as this goes, this is going to be the title of the module. So how did you find us? Description, show a how did you find us field in the customer registration. Same thing here. We're going to take out your facts must contain a minimum of a number of characters. We're not going to need that. And the how find us text, we will leave that as is for now. We want to, anything that says facts, we're going to go through from top to bottom and review this whole thing just to make sure we don't miss anything. I could just search and skim down, but we're going to review every single thing on the way down. So we will change this to how find us. The status. So again, just as a refresher, the key base is this. The status is being appended to that. So essentially this becomes status like that in the database, in the config database. And we're going to say enable how did you find us module. Do you want to add this module to your shop? We'll leave that there as a true or false. Customer data group, this is basically where in this list it's going to go. So under personal information, address, and so on, there is a function that allows you to choose that in the admin. So we can leave this just as it is, and it will give us that control. Required, yes or no. So we'll just say required. Do you want the, well, again, we're just replacing every instance of facts so far. Minimum length, we're going to remove that. Pages, this is the pages that it would show the question. The sort order, so we'll just increment this. Now, if you want to take the time, it doesn't hurt to go over to the admin and go under your customer data modules and just skim and look at what the existing numbers are. So I can see 5,800, 6,300 looks like the highest number there. Install a module. We'll just maybe choose 7,000 just to make sure that it's going to be at the bottom of the list. We don't want this at the top of the form, so we'll just default it to a high number to get it down there. Template. It's going to use the whole row input template. I'm not going to dig into that, but it's a generic template, so we'll leave that for now. So now we're done the get parameters. If we look at the get, again, we're going to replace every instance of facts with how find us. So this is just saying if the customer details how find us is set, then continue and set the value of this to its value that's stored in the database. Customer details, we're going to keep this the same. You'll notice these two are different. That's only because this is the name in the database and this is the name of the field. We're actually going to name them both the same thing. So we can just change it like that. Display input, this is obviously going to be what is visible on the screen. So the label text is going to be entry facts. We're going to want to change that to entry how find us. Now again, I'm going to, everything is prepended with for the IDs of it's got input in front of it. So again, if we go back to here, if I pull up my developer tools and I was to go look at each of these fields, you can see it's got input first name, it'll be input last name, and so on. Every one of these is going to have input in front of it. So just to stick with that, we will change this to input how find us. These all look good. Most of these replaced at the beginning when we did our search and replace. If it's required, it's going to force it. We can just leave that as is. The field that we want, how find us. We're just going to replace all these cases of facts. So not empty customer details. How find us is going to equal the value that's from the get. So this is going to be whatever is passed to it. So if the form is reloading, say that something wasn't filled out correctly, it's going to grab it from the get, which would be that page reloading. Again, how find us, change that. So an easy thing would be just search and replace all facts with how find us, but I want to go through each of these just to make sure that it's not something that I don't understand or something that I need to adjust. So the input field is going to be how find us. It's going to have its attributes, which will be ID and placeholder will be in there. And this is what actually draws the field. And then it's going to map it to the template system. You could go and edit your template system to make that look different if you wanted to. Process, customer details, how find us. We're going to prepare the input. It just cleans whatever's being saved to make sure that it's safe. If string length, customer details, how find us is less than base constant min length. So we got rid of the minimum length function. So all of this can go. I'm just going to quickly look that over. So we're not worried about that at all. Building of the database values. If we look through this, that looks fine. It's going into the customer's database. We're going to call it how find us, and we're putting in a value of how find us. Same thing here. So really, that's all that's required. So if I was to save this and we were to go and add a module, we can see how did you find us. If I install that and edit this, we've got the enabling and disabling of the module. We can choose which data group we want it to go in. So we'll leave it under your contact information. So that will put it under newsletter. On what pages, you can choose which pages you want that to appear. 7,000, so it's at the bottom of the group, and the template. So if we save that, and then we go back here and refresh, we now have how did you find us. So that's a simple version of it. If we were to go through and fill this out, it would save that information as we enter it, and it would then be in our profile. Now, if I go and look at my existing customers, by doing what we did, if I go into a customer, I get an error. The reason I get an error is because we said in order to display the input, it's actually going to load this field, how find us, from the customer's database. But the problem is that field does not exist in the customer's database. So as a result, it throws an error because there is no field in the customer's database called how find us, and so it errors out. So what we're going to do at the top of this is we are going to write a check query that's going to check the customer's database for how find us, and then it's going to check and see if that's empty. And if it is, it's then going to alter the table customers and add the column how find us with a default of empty. And so what this bit of code is going to do is when we do the get parameters, which is going to fire when we go edit the module. So we'll just leave that right there. And we will go back in our admin. And we will disable the module and reinstall it. And by doing that, it now has ran that code that we just put in there. So if we were to go under customers and then edit a customer, we no longer get an error, and we actually get the question right here. So if I was to say Google in here and save the customer and then go back in, I have Google saved. So that's the simplest part of it. So now if we want to make it a little bit more complicated, we can actually make it so that there's a drop-down list for our options, so they don't have to just type it in. We can actually create a list for them that they can choose from. And the way we're going to do that is if we go down to right here where we've got the input field, we're just going to ram that out. Let's just go up here. We're going to create one more field. So we're just going to duplicate one of these. That'll be close to what we need. We're going to call this options. and we'll leave it empty, and we will enter in a description of enter in a list of options separated by a comma. Example, Google, radio, TV. Okay, so now if I go back and we go back to customer data modules, how'd you find us? And I edit this, we can see we have a list of options here now. So if I was to just use the default and save that, now we're ready to start using the options variable. Now if you remember, the options variable is going to be prepended by that. So we now have a constant that we can use down here. So if I say options equals explode, and we're going to separate by a comma, and we're going to pull it from that variable, options now becomes an array of each of those values. So then we're going to say options list equals array, and then we're going to say for each options, and we will add to the options list, and in that we'll add an ID which will equal option, and we'll actually add quotes around that, and text will also equal option. So now at the end of this, and if you're ever not sure of what you're going to have for output, you could do a var dump on this. So now if I was to go back and refresh this, I can see my options show up there, so I can see that I've got the 3 options and it's pulling them in correctly. So I can just go back here now and say input equals, this is a built-in function currently, pull down menu, how find us, values will be the options list. The value, the default value will be how find us. And then we'll add in our attribute. And we'll just copy the example that we remmed out above. So now what that should do is if I go back and refresh this, I now have a drop down. How did you find us? With a drop down. And if I was to go look at my customers and edit one of them, the drop down also shows up there, so I can choose whatever option I want. Now we might want to go one step farther. Another option would be we could edit how it shows in the admin list. So if I go under customers, you'll notice on the preview we don't see it on the right hand side. So a really good way of figuring out how do I get information over here without editing the core. I can just pick something that's being shown that's fairly unique. So country wouldn't be, I'm going to find tons of those. But if I say number of logons, there's not a whole lot of those going to show up in the core. So then if I search for that, I can see the number of logons, and I can see that that's under the languages English customers. So that's pretty good bet that that's the right one because I'm on the customers page here. So if I was to open that and then copy its constant and then search for that, I should find the usage of that, which is again in the customer's PHP file. And so here I can see the number of logins. If I was to rem that out and then go back here and refresh, I can see it disappears. If I add it back in and go back and refresh, it comes back. So I know I'm in the right spot. Now again, how do I edit this without editing the core? I don't want to add a line here because I'm currently editing the customer's PHP file, which is in the admin, which is a core file. And if I make changes here, that's not the way things should be done. Again, if you haven't watched the video on why you don't want to edit the core, go do that. It's just not something you want to do. It really locks you into the version that you're currently using, and every time you go to upgrade, it just makes it very painful to get to the next version. So if you look down here, you'll notice that there's an info box. So the way that this works is that we can actually, even though it doesn't say right here, listen info box, if you were to dig into the info box, you can see that there is actually a hook that's called info box. So we can actually write against that. So we're going to have to create a module. It's going to be an admin module, or sorry, a hook. So we're going to go under includes, hooks, admin, and we're going to create a new folder called customers. And then we are going to add a file, and we will call this how find us. We'll create a class in here called class hook admin customers how find us. And then in here we'll create a function that is listen info box. And part of this, if we go back to the hook, you'll notice that it passes parameters. Some of the hooks do pass parameters, and in doing that, that's how they get the information. You can see the contents variable is being passed in with reference. And so that means the variable is actually being handed right into the hook and will come out altered if you alter contents inside the parameters inside the hook. So it gives us an opportunity to make changes to the data. So if and you can call this whatever you want, but just for consistency, I'll leave it parameters. So if I was to do a var dump of parameters and then go back and refresh this, I can see the parameters that are coming in for this area. The first one is all the buttons. So that's the edit, delete, orders, email. I can see the account created information, last modified. Each of the pieces of information below are actually coming in here. So I could actually remove item 4 and number of logins would also disappear. But I can push an element into this so we can actually make this list longer and therefore show more information here. So with that, what I'm going to do is just go back again and look at the data that's coming in. So the customer information is in this variable, and because this variable is available here, once it gets down to info box, that variable is in memory. It's not being cleared anywhere. So CInfo is likely available to me. The way I'm going to check is just make CInfo global inside my hook, and then I'll do a var dump of CInfo just to have a quick look and see what's available. And I can see the entirety of what's available from the customer. Now if you look in here, you can see how find us. So by us adding that database field to the table, and we edited already John Smith and made it so that how find us was equal to radio, so we can see that value. So we know that we have this right here available to us. So what we're going to do array push parameters, and we will add to it an array. Now if we go back again, I'm just going to do var dumper parameters. I can see that each parameter has a text and an optional class. I'm just going to push a text value in there to make sure it works. So if I was to go in here and say text, and I said testing, and then I go back and refresh this. See, I made a mistake. It's actually under contents. So I have to go like that. And there's our testing value. The reason we don't see it in our array here is because we're dumping it before I add it. So if I was to move this dump down here and refresh, I would now see my 7th item. So I can go back here and I can say, how found us. And we can then add in cinfo, how found us, and refresh. Now that didn't work, so we're just going to do a dump again of cinfo, how find us. That's why. Hide those, refresh. This is in the wrong spot. There we go. So we might decide to change this to something like this. But now you've got it so that you have a custom module plus a hook that gives you a little bit of extra functionality to be able to track one more piece of information for your customers. You could keep going, obviously, and make it more and more complicated, do more and more things, but this should give you a fair idea of what's possible just by creating a customer data module, by cloning another customer data module, and working it forward. So hopefully you found something useful here. One thing to keep in mind that I'll just mention is creating an info box listen works in many of the areas of the admin. So it's not just under customers. So you can play around with getting all kinds of extra information into the info boxes for selected items on the left, get them showing up on the right. So that's kind of cool. Also, I'll be adding this module to phoenixcart.org. I will put a link to that in the description for the video, just so that you can download it and play with it yourself. Again, if you want to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like if you feel this video taught you something. By subscribing and liking to the video, you really do help me out, and I really appreciate that. So more videos to come soon. Thanks for watching, and until next time.